Carson Overwood with the Vroom vlog, coming to you from Manhattan Beach. Okay, scratch all of that. We're actually coming to you from sunny San Diego. I didn't have time to record everything that I wanted to in LA, but that's besides the point. So, welcome to episode 1 of my racing story. And what I want to do with this series is take you through how I got into racing, how I found autocross, and the reasons why behind it. I wanted to start this 3 years ago when I first got in it, and kind of take you along step by step in the process, just to appreciate the process of getting into the sport. But I never quite got around to vlogging in those first few years, and maybe that's for the best. I actually have some experience under my belt now, so it feels a little bit better talking about it. But I still wanted to, with this racing story, take you through the very beginning when I was first thinking about getting into it, what sparked the idea, and kind of analyze a little bit of the process there. So we'll work our way up to present day eventually there. But beginning back in 2014, first I should say 2013 was a rough year for me. I had gotten out of a tough relationship that year, and really kind of wanted to reinvent myself. I think everybody reinvents themselves at certain stages in their life, and finds new passions, things they enjoy doing. And I was really just kind of unhappy with the routine that I was in. I should mention I was new to Portland. I was living in Portland at the time, and not a really naturally outgoing person. And so I had a job, or I have a job down there, and but I after work I'd stay in quite a bit, and Portland's a great city to get out and go see. I mean, I did do some of that, but really just wanted to find something new that I was really passionate about. And it took a lot of introspection and working on myself and that type of thing. And so it was in that sort of phase that I was working on myself that I really thought to myself, what could I enjoy doing that I didn't, if I didn't have to worry about the cost or the barrier to entry or money or anything like that, what could I really enjoy doing with my life that I could spend a decade on easily, and focus on that, and put my efforts and form goals around that. And so with racing, I haven't got into this in a traditional way. I mean, I haven't been racing karts since I was 5 or anything like that. I'm not a gearhead. I hadn't done any sort of participation in racing beyond a couple go-kart tracks at Long Beach one time. So my history spans back as a spectator. But some of the best memories that I have are my dad taking me to Evergreen Speedway up in Monroe, Washington, and I've been going there just since I was a baby. My dad has been taking me there, and some of the best memories are the fair, walking around and playing games and eating corn on the cob and elephant ears and stuff like that, with my aunt and uncle up there, and my cousins. And really that was all just kind of a preface to the main event. Once the day started to settle down and the sun was lower in the sky, you'd start to hear you know, you'd start to hear the race cars out on track there, and you couldn't see them. They were up over the banking of the wall. But I just remember that bringing so much excitement when you could start to hear the cars going around the track, and that was like the main event. And so we'd work our way over to the grandstands after we were done with all the fair activities, and I just remembered I couldn't wait to get up into the grandstands to see the cars out on track once you could hear them. And so we'd been doing that a long time. I mean, those were childhood memories, but I know that my dad said we watched Bill Elliott there one time in the mid '80s, and some of the big names that really came through stock car or NASCAR have raced it at Evergreen Speedway. And so that was one of my best memories, going back to childhood and watching those just watching those circle track races. I always liked, they had all sorts of different stuff there. They had, bumblebees or hornets as they call them, and I love seeing that because I love seeing how many cars they could cram on the track at one time. And they had all sorts of bump to pass type of racing. And later my uncle got into the demolition derbies there, and that was always fun to go watch and root him on in the demolition derbies. And my cousin Chris even did that for a couple years there. So that's kind of it. As far back as I remember racing, my dad would always watch IndyCar and later on NASCAR, and so I've always been brought up watching that stuff, and that was entertaining as well. But I guess you could say my history in racing is just as a spectator. By the time I decided I wanted to do this and get into it, I was thinking, okay, well, what type of car? How am I gonna really do this? And at the time, a lot of the reasoning behind telling this story is just that I amazed myself, not in a bragging sort of way, but once I set the goal that I set this goal that within 1 year I wanted to have a car that I could be out on track with. And at the time, my dad had mentioned to me Spec Miatas. You should check out these Spec Miata guys. They race at PIR, and we went and watched them at the Rose Cup races. And so I kind of got to thinking, okay, well, what's around me? What can I get into, like entry level? And these Spec Miata guys really caught my attention because I love the way that they race. If you watch some of the YouTubes, I love that they'll bump draft on the straights, and I guess coming from NASCAR, I appreciated that. And at the same time, it seemed to me at the time that it was a fairly entry level racing that you could get into. And of course, everything around the Northwest, or most of it around the Northwest, is there's more opportunities for road racing as opposed to circle track. And just thinking what I would enjoy more, I pictured enjoying road racing more than circle track. And so I started looking for a Miata. At the time, I had been driving a automatic for the last 5 years, and I had actually just recently in 2013 I purchased a Honda CRZ, which because the CRX was the first car I ever owned, and I always loved how fun that car was to throw around and just easy to drive and fun to drive. And so the only newer car I've ever bought was it was a 2011 Honda CRZ. And it was an automatic, and I had been driving an automatic for the last 5 years basically, and so that was a little bit of a worry for me. Not too much. I mean, I had learned driving on my dad's Isuzu pickup, which is a manual diesel pickup. So if you can drive that, you can drive anything. But at the same time, it was a concern or a thought for me. And so I had basically looking into what I was going to drive. Of course, at this point, I'm looking for a Miata, and my only stipulation beyond that, and that it's good running, is that I wanted something with a roll bar, because looking into what's required to drive on track, convertible requires a roll bar, and so I actually spent the spring of 2014. I spent 2 to 3 months, quite a while, looking for a Miata that already had a roll bar in it. Come up on Craigslist. There was one I went and checked out. It was an NA Miata, and actually, test drove it. The guy was only asking $2,500. It had a ton of miles on it, but I was really interested. I almost made him an offer, but when I got back, I tried to start it up a second time to look under the hood and look at the engine and stuff, and it wouldn't start after I drove it the first time. And so I just bagged that completely. I said, okay, thanks, but no thanks, and continued my search, and it probably took another month or so maybe 3 months total, and saw this little silver 99 Miata come up on Craigslist, and I could just see he had pictured it with the top up, but I could see the little crossbars in the back window. I called him right away, and he had it posted for like 2 hours at that point. I said, I want to come look at your Miata today, and I had actually been saving for a few months as well, because of course I couldn't sell my Honda before then. I needed transportation to get to and from work and back home and stuff. But I called him up right away, said I'll come up there and check it out. I actually talked this girl at work. I talked her into driving me up to Vancouver to check it out, and because I was ready to buy. As soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, if this thing runs good, I'm gonna buy it. And so went and took all my money out of the bank. We drove up to Vancouver after work. Thank you, Erica, by the way, if you ever watch this video, for doing that for me. And basically test drove it with him, and it ran great. He was asking $3,900. I was so confident, or I was confident enough in my deal making skills that I brought $3,500 cash with me. And so I'm like, if he's not gonna work with me at all, then I'll walk away from it. But I wanted to barter with him a little bit, and really, $3,900 was probably a good price for it. It had 135K on it when I bought it, or 130K, somewhere around there. And so basically I drove it around with him. Didn't realize at the time this is the owner of Cork Sport. I didn't even know what Cork Sport was at the time. And we get back to his place, and I said, well, can you work with me on it at all? I really like it. I'd like to buy it today. And he said, well, I've had a couple other calls on it, but I'd take $3,500 if you want. And I quipped back just real quick. I said, I'll give you $3,400 cash right now for it. He said, man, you're a wheeler and dealer. And so he went for it. He said, yeah, I'll give it to you for $3,400. Plunked it all down right there, and that's how I got my Miata. And so I was halfway to this year goal that I had just in the first couple months to buy a Miata and get on track. I figured getting on track was probably the harder of the two. But at that point, I'd been watching. At that point, I still had to sell my CRZ, so that was another logistical thing, because I had a loan out for that and wanted to be out from under the loan, and that probably took another month or two. It took some time, but eventually I got rid of the CRZ, broke even on the loan basically, and I was done with automatics at that point. But by this time, I'd been watching Spec Miata for a few months, and it was my favorite racer was Danny Steyn, and he was just an amazing car driver, amazing racer. What he could do with the wheel and the limits he could push on the corners just seemed unreal sometimes. And I one race in particular that just got me hooked, I was like, okay, I want to do Spec Miata, was the 2013 National Runoffs. And there's a couple versions of the video I'll link in the description, because you should definitely check them out if you appreciate that sort of thing. But there's the actual sports cast of it. Mr. Popst does the announcing for it. And then there's also this in-car video of Danny Steyn driving in the runoffs, and something had happened to him in qualifying, and so he had to start at the back of the field, or he qualified like 26th. Maybe there were 40 some cars or 50 some cars on track, and so in this race it was just amazing. Like, he worked his way from 26th all the way up to the podium by the finish of the race, and just watching how masterfully he wheeled that car and made passes on that tight road course. I believe it was Road America. It was Road America where it was at that year, and just watching that amazing race was had me hooked. That really helped set my goal for Spec Miata and getting on track. And so one moment here, my arm's falling asleep. I got to figure out something else. Figure out some other way to do this. So thank you again to Danny for letting me use a clip of his video here and show you how he drives. But he's really been an inspiration to me, just as far as my initial idea to get into the sport, my initial goal of getting into racing. And so now that I had this Miata, I knew I wasn't going to turn it into a Spec Miata, because there was just so many things that you had to do to the car, but I knew that it would allow me to get the practice that I need in the type of car that I need. And so at that point, I was thinking, okay, this is going to take a little time. I knew that you had to have a racer's license to race in any sort of Spec Miata race, or most of the road course races in general. You had to go through and get a license if you were going to race with the SCCA, which I'd been scouring everything. You know, I'd just been looking at the PIR event calendar, seeing, you know, what events they're running on what weekends, what organizations run these, what type of event it is, and that's kind of when I came across autocross and learned a little bit more about that. You know, it's a great entry-level way to get your feet wet with the sport. You know, for one, if you've never done anything in regards to racing before, and you have goals towards that, autocross is a great, inexpensive way to just come out and try performance driving. And it's not on a track. It's a pylon course that they set up at a different course every time. But it's, like I mentioned, it's inexpensive. You can take your own car out. All you need is a driver's license. And I didn't really know at the time. I'm one of those people who totally over prepares for everything before they'll take action on it. And so I was like reading the rule book, and oh god, I have to have a copy of the rule book. If somebody protests me, it's up to me to prove what's in the rules. And thinking about all of this before I even go out and do my first event. But by this point, it was it was towards the end of the year, because I think I had something going on in August where I couldn't make one of them, and so I'm like, okay, this is the last chance. It was the end of September in 2014, and I said to myself, you know, I've got to get out there and at least drive this car this year, before the winter, and working towards next year, deciding what I'm going to do and how I'm going to get on track. I've got to at least go out and drive the car, try it out. And so there were these last two events, the last two events of the Oregon SCCA season, and I decided, okay, I'm just going to do it. I felt totally unprepared, but in actuality, I really wasn't. I had a car and a driver's license. That's all you really need. And so called my dad up, said, okay, it's this Saturday. It's now or never as far as this year goes. Let's go out and try an autocross. And so he drove down and met me at PIR the next morning, and we actually did it. It was amazing. I borrowed a helmet. Everybody there was really friendly and welcoming. I didn't have to worry at all about the rules. I mean, I had stuff on the car I had wrong size tires and wheels and a few other ththings on the car that weren't legal for the class I was running in. But everybody was really welcoming, and I believe the first day I ran in class in E Street, and I actually had no other competitors to compare myself to, but that was okay. It was as soon as I was at the start line and punched the gas pedal and got maybe into the first or second turn, I'm thinking, okay, this is it. It had me. It had me hook, line, and sinker. So I remember just smiling coming through the finish on that first run, and I think I still have video of it. Maybe I can overlay it here, but pretty sure I still have video of that first event, and that was just so fun. I'm thinking, okay, well, this can at least tide me over till I get on track. This is going to be awesome. And ran that first event, was so happy with it that we decided, okay, the very last event was the very next day on Sunday, and we decided to come back, and I ran it again. Brought my brother came down, and my dad was there again, and just got some more practice in the car. Ran time only that day, so it's just your raw time, but it felt pretty good at the time about stacking up. It was like 5th out of 10 in the time only, but that's one of the things that I really liked about autocross just right off the bat, was there's all this great competition. And I was, one of the big reasons I got into or wanted to get into racing, aside from just always enjoying watching racing, was the competitive aspect, seeing how you stack up against the field. I love it when there's tons of drivers in the class, because the more drivers, the better to me. I like really seeing how you stack up, and so I'd always rather be in a class of a dozen or 15 or 20 people than racing against myself or 3 other people. So that was it. That was how I first started. And in the next episode, I will definitely take you through that off season, what we decided to do in the off season, and how I first got on track the following year, and carried things forward with this goal of racing that I had. So thanks so much for watching. I hope it inspired you a little bit here, and especially if you haven't done racing and you're thinking about getting into it somehow, some way. I can let you know from my original layman's perspective that it is definitely possible. So if you have any questions, certainly let me know. Get a hold of me, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. So thanks, and we'll see you again next time. Take me away. Ooh,
waking up slowly, never felt as sweet. And there's no